Hey everyone, this is Rocky, and I was able to get the WeLearnChess.com blog back up, so some of you know that last week it was down because it was hacked, so got it all cleaned out, it's accessible again. For my first video back, I wanted to just show an endgame pattern that I came across in my game last night. I'm not going to go over the whole game, but I will quickly show the opening, because it's actually an opening that I featured in one of my previous videos, this crazy Danish gambit, where black is actually crazy himself and takes these two pawns and allows white to have these menacing bishops. I think I might have actually recommended knight f6 first in the video, but maybe I did this. I think I have to make a part 2 to that video because I'm pretty sure I only covered knight c3 in those variations, and the last couple times I've faced this, white has played knight d2. So yeah, and also there are some lines where white king actually goes to f1 voluntarily, which actually I think is the computer recommended move. And I think I did face that once too. So yeah, maybe I'll make another part or two to that video later. And actually, there's an important difference between the knight being on these squares, because if, for example, the white knight goes here and we get this line, and white takes this knight, black has this intermezzo move with queen takes f6, and the point is that the bishop is under attack, and also there are two pieces converging on c3 to either win material or force the king off his square. I mean, white can play a check here, but you can still play c6, and the white queen can come out. And the idea of playing the check here first is that eventually, if black captures on this square, that he's going to have to ruin his pawn structure, which is one of the things that he's gotten in return for this crazy initiative that he's given to white. Of course, he has the pawns as well, but it'd be nice to keep these pawns protected, especially because they're protected passers. So white's idea with this would be just to mess that up. But anyway, this whole variation isn't even possible when the knight's on d2, obviously. Because knight on d2, and we get this d5, d5, whoops, takes, and now there is no queen takes f6 because the bishop's protecting it. So you would have to take here, and we would get something like this. And black is still actually better, especially because he should be able to stave off the initiative. And this pawn is really weak. I mean, right now it's protected, but I was able to win it in the game, and I think in a lot of variations, black is able to comfortably win it. And once that happens, then white's really in trouble, unless he can get something immediate. But it's kind of tough for him to do that. Like in the game, he actually just played a totally normal-looking move where he could castle and then get the rook over. But he's actually losing on the spot here. I played the first right move, but I didn't see this fork at all. I just had a fork here on c3, so I missed that. And the reason I'm not going to show from this point on is because I think I made 6 blunders in the middle game, and my opponent made 9 blunders, and we both had mistakes and accuracies. Like, we probably had more bad moves than good moves in this game, so although it's definitely useful to learn from mistakes, there's so many that it's a complete mess. It's pretty common, I think, in tactically sharp positions because we can't play like computers. But yeah, but that was an especially bad game, so I want to go ahead and skip forward to, we got into an end game where probably I was a little better. I had an extra pawn, and I was a little quicker to make the passed pawn. But I just want to go ahead and show this pattern that I was talking about. So I offered a trade here. He correctly probably didn't take it because I have these really fast connected passers. But then maybe he had the idea where he thought he was going to be able to blockade the pawns, but he forgot that my knight was covering this last dark square, so he just has to give up the bishop. So yeah, I mean, with an extra knight and a pretty far past pawn, it looks like it's pretty routine, and it is pretty easy, but there's a pattern here that I wanted to show you. So first, the king comes over, and actually, he is in time to get in the square, so you can't just queen, he'll actually catch it. And you also can't try to protect the queen square with the knight. I mean, of course, he can't take the knight, but he can take the pawn. And you're still up a knight, but now maybe he has a way to get rid of the pawns, so you got to be careful. So you do have to be a little bit, not get too lazy when you're up, and that happens to me all the time where I'm just in a totally winning position, and I just get lazy. So the first thing I want to show is that imagine if this knight were a pawn. Okay, we'll get this off the board, and we'll also make the connect passers here. And imagine the white king was here. The white king can never take this pawn, so you've probably seen this pattern. If he ever takes this pawn, then this pawn queens, and he can't catch it. So the pawns protect each other, And we see the same pattern with the knight. So basically the king would just be stuck there in that situation. Just got to refresh this. And back to where we were. Okay. So we want to set up a position where these two pieces protect each other, and then the white king is just helpless. Well, if we leave them as they are, like if the white king were to come all the way over here, oops, and get to this spot, actually he would be able to just take this knight, because then he would also be able to play king here and just protect against his pawn or take it. In the meantime, of course, black could be taking these pawns, and that might be enough on its own. Just because white would have to waste so much time doing this, probably he would lose anyway. But I think the pattern's important to look at, that we want to set these pieces up so that they protect each other, and right now they're not. So it is actually helpful if you're up a knight in the endgame. It's not always necessarily winning. You actually have to be really careful with these endgames, because if, for example, I didn't have this h-pawn and this h-pawn could run, then it would be really tricky. Probably still winning for black, but you'd have to be careful depending on where your king and your knight were. A lot of times the knight can't come over to the other side of the board fast enough, or even if it's close to that side of the board, sometimes it just can't get to the correct square to prevent against queening. I mean, we've probably all had that happen to us at some point or another. I know I have several times where my knight's just ineffective stopping the pawns. So you do have to be careful. So in this situation, it's not so hard, but we can set up a position where at least the white king is just basically helpless and has to bounce around on squares that don't do anything for him. So yeah, because my king's already over on the side of the board, I should be okay. Now, white might have a way to get rid of these pawns. Like if he's able to push the pawns and we have to trade everything, and I was only left with these two, then I would really want to make sure that I set this up correctly. And maybe we should even look at that at the end with no other pieces. But first I'll show you the pattern. So again, if you leave these pieces how they are, it's not correct. But what you can do is put the knight behind the pawn. So now we have a similar situation where the two pieces protect each other. And as we saw in the game, the white player came over here, and then he quickly realized that he can't ever take the knight, because if he takes the knight, then the pawn queens, and he obviously can't take the pawn because it's protected by the knight. So now he just has to bounce around back and forth, and I'm just essentially up another piece. I'm up two pieces now, because he can't do anything. He played on time, of course, and then lost on time. So anyway, the result's not so important because we both blundered away this game so many times. But I did want to show this pattern of the knight and the pawn protecting each other, because it could come in handy at some occasions where you just freeze the opponent's king and you can take care of business on the other side of the board. If there were no other pawns on the board, let's see how that would look. Actually, I didn't look at this yet. Let's take this off. So, well, okay, the white king's already in position. Let's see. But I imagine that you should be able to get over here pretty easily. Now you have diagonal opposition, so that when he plays here, you can get opposition. And yeah, eventually you're gonna get here, and then I think you just have to be careful about stalemate. So let's say probably he would want to, I don't know, try to set up some kind of stalemate, but I don't think it's really possible. Yeah, he's got a square he's got a couple squares to go to, so just making sure I'm not stalemating him here. Yeah, and then then it's just doesn't matter. So okay, so that actually was pretty easy. So you just want to get into that square, but I think people would figure that out pretty easily. But it just shows another way that you can set up a situation that's similar to the two connected passers where the knight's protecting the pawn. So hopefully that pattern comes in handy for you at some point, and I'll see you around for the next video.